If we can help people leading teams in restaurants get the basics right, if we can get good leadership in place and we can get good financials in place, then we go on and we can tackle environmental change.
Melina, I know you from the Highline, and that's where we met, but I don't know, I actually have no idea where you were before that. What were you doing before the Highline?
Yeah.
And then how the heck did you end up at MAD?
Yeah, I feel so fortunate for the ways my professional life has developed. So I grew up in Albany, New York, and I never went to culinary school, unlike so many of the people we work with. I was at university, but felt super at home when I was either in my job prepping in a kitchen, or when I was during summers working out on farms. And I had a consulting job after college and learned plenty about making businesses efficient. And I also realized that what I really wanted to work with was where my passions lie. And that was like very clearly food. It was very clearly agriculture, education, community building. And this was the early 2000s. So there were sort of restaurant jobs or there were education jobs. There were very few people doing those two things together.
Where'd you go to school?
I went to Harvard University.
Oh, I've heard of that place.
Yeah, that place. Yeah. Turns out there were 2 courses on food taught at Harvard. And in the 4 years I was there, they were canceled every time I tried to take some.
Really?
Yeah.
I imagine there's more now. I bet there has to be more now.
There are absolutely more. And part of that is because the field has shifted dramatically, right? We now understand that food is an important part of economies, of climate, of nutrition, at least in a way that we're willing to integrate into our education more actively, right?
Yeah.
The job I had before I was at the Highline was at the Yale Sustainable Food Project. And that was, when I started, it was a mandate. It was an idea only to figure out how the dining halls at Yale could serve local organic food, to think about what it would mean if Yale students were excited about food and agriculture. It had been started by Alice Waters, the chef from Berkeley, and the then president of the university, having a conversation one day when Alice's daughter joined the school. And what I loved about that time was that I got to work with these both incredible students and incredible chefs from each of the dining halls. They were putting out 8,000 meals a day. And what we were trying to figure out is how can you change the food system that is a small liberal arts college.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting because of the dichotomy of New Haven as well, right?
Yeah.
Because Yale is like this pocket of the upper echelon of colleges and demographic and people, and then walk 2 blocks and it's pretty impoverished.
Yeah.
I'm curious if there was any sort of external work done, like outside of the food system in Yale, of like the neighborhood as well.
So I think the university's taken very seriously a commitment to New Haven and to partnering with the government, with the city government, to make sure that New Haven continues to become a better and better place to live for people, whether they work at the university or attend the university or not. And what I loved was that we had a small acre. It was called the Yale Farm. And that was created as a place for students to learn, to really get their hands in the soil, understand what agriculture is, how to grow, how it's related to big questions around climate. But it was also a place that community members came. And so it was a spot on university grounds where people, literally from both sides of the hill. We were on a hill, one side the wealthiest neighborhood in New Haven, the other side the poorest neighborhood in New Haven, where those 2 communities were able to come together. And this is the power of food, right? This is the power of bringing people together through food.
Well, what I mean, so you came from Albany and then you went to Harvard. Why food? What brought you to like get into the food scene?
Great question. Does one ever know what causes their path truly? But one answer is, grew up in a family where both sets of grandparents were farmers. My mom regularly took us out of school when I was very little so we could go harvest strawberries and blueberries and put them up for the winter so we would have good, healthy, affordable fruit. But that was a type of work I loved. I love the beauty of sound agricultural practice, and I love the beauty in food. And it just kept calling my name.
So yes, you had a lot of family background with it as well. Sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's an important thing to make time. Food is an important thing to make time for in our families.
Yeah, it's so interesting the ways in which people get into the food business, and now, of course, to your point, there's so many more facets of the food business other than just cooking. Obviously, this organization is as a testament to that. But there's so many things that people now do in the food world outside of just running a restaurant, and it really is interesting how people get into the things that they're into. Food, obviously, there's a lot more surface area of like getting into food because we all grow up with food. So whether we, have parents that cook really well or we have farms. But it is kind of like random how we get into the things that we that we enjoy almost, but through no doing of our own. It's like we either, grow up that way or we don't. And I wanted to talk to you about this when we talk about MAD. It's like there's just so much more happening in the food industry outside of just restaurants now that people that otherwise probably wouldn't be in in that industry are doing. And I'm just curious how much MAD is being a part of effectuating that. But obviously, we'll talk about that when we get into MAD. But so you were at the High Line, and then what happened? So I understand. I see sort of the path from like Yale sustainability to High Line. How did MAD come about?
Being at the High Line was fantastic. Not only did I get to work with an amazing, the Highline staff, meet people like Meryl, meet people like you. I also got sightlines and got to work alongside some of the best restaurateurs in New York City and best entrepreneurs. So that was a moment of getting to see what Danny Meyer was doing at Union Square Hospitality Group, meeting James Freeman at Blue Bottle, Marco Canara from Hearth, of course, Fanny Gerson from La New Yorkina. And that made me incredibly curious about the restaurant world, which I hadn't been paying attention to previously. And through a series of fortunate coincidences, I met René Redzepi, and he started talking about what he wanted to build around education and food for the restaurant industry. And
Sorry, how did you meet René? What was the scenario in which that popped up?
The actual thing that happened was I sat at a dinner next to someone who had been at a MAD symposium, and he said, "You should hear about this organization in Copenhagen." And a month later, he called and he said, "Danny Meyer canceled. He can't come to dinner. You have to come fill his shoes." And I laughed because that's not possible, right? But I went to dinner, and one of René's investors was at that dinner. And for whatever reason, he kept saying, "You need to go to Copenhagen and you need to meet René." And he came and met me for breakfast every month for 6 months until I said, "Okay, fine. I'm going to India. I'll stop in Copenhagen on my way back. I need a layover in Europe anyway. That's fine." And so that's where it started.
Wow, that's so serendipitous. So that's how you met him, and then it sounds like maybe he courted you to join. How long did it take from that first time you met René to decide, okay, great, I'm going to go do this?
It's a little while. I liked the vision of what he was talking about right away. Fine dining at that point wasn't particularly interesting to me. I hadn't been to fine dining restaurants as a kid. It wasn't a place my family felt at home or welcome. But what really appealed to me about the way René talked about MAD and what he wanted for the restaurant world was he understood that we're better off when we're in a community that's pushing for change and helping us to be better versions of ourselves, and that he was incredibly curious and open. He didn't believe there was only one right way. And both that curiosity, that openness, and that commitment to improvement really spoke to me.
So what was the overall vision that he shared with you?
It was as simple as that. Right? Let's create an organization that helps everyone who is working in restaurants dare to make a difference. So that was a very broad mandate. What is that? How do you turn that vision into an organization that is helping people? And so over time, we've carved out, we think of MAD as, we're an organization that's by hospitality and for hospitality. And what we want to do is help people working, and I say restaurants, but really we are serving people in restaurants, people in canteens, people in school cafeterias, people at your local coffee shop or at a wine bar. So it's baristas, it's servers, it's chefs, it's head chefs, it's restaurant owners and managers that come to us. But we started to ask ourselves the question of how can these people help contribute to making the industry a better place to work? And how can they help contribute to making the world better? And it's a couple of big factors. In the US, restaurants are one of the biggest private employers in the country. 1 in 3 Americans has worked in a restaurant. That's huge potential. And yet we know what's happening in kitchens is not always the way we would want employees to be treated, right? In Denmark, restaurants have a rate of sexual harassment that's twice as high as any other industry. So there's a gap there in what our ambitions are for restaurant culture, work culture, and the skills people have. So one thing we try to do is close that gap. And then the other thing we look to is the environment and how can food be a source of positive change and be a source of joy. When we look at food being the second largest contributor to climate change, when we look at it being the biggest contributor to biodiversity loss, this is where I feel like chefs and restaurants have an amazing, almost untapped potential to change the world. I'm not sure I answered your question.
No, you did, and also you answered my other question, which is sort of generally speaking, what are the mandates or the goals of MAD? And it sounds like it's both to help impact change in the food industry itself, meaning like in the restaurant industry, like how that operates, as well as as a whole for the world, whether it's climate or sustainability or agriculture, impacts there as well.
I used to think about it really as a Maslow hierarchy almost. If we can help people leading teams in restaurants get the basics right, if we can get good leadership in place and we can get good financials in place, then we go on and we can tackle environmental change. More and more, we're seeing those are so closely intertwined. It's not an
Mm-hmm.
either or, it's not a first then. They're all 3 areas need to be
Yeah,
starting
no, it's so
points.
true. I mean, so many restaurants, it's tough. You're almost week to week a lot of times. And Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a great way to think about it. You're just thinking about payroll, let
That's right.
alone what you can do for the entirety of your company or the entirety of the world or even your neighborhood. How do you help restaurant operators, or just generally it sounds like kitchen operators? How do you help them take better control of their destiny in that way? What are the things
Mm.
that MAD does for that?
That's such a nice way to say it, Josh. So we have 3 major ways we interact with the restaurant world. So one is through educational courses, the other through publications and newsletters, and then another through our MAD Mondays, which are sort of evening discussions, evening salons. And, in each of these, they're carefully crafted so they're paying attention to who we serve and what their challenges are. To start with the educational classes, that's our academy program. They are run right now as 5-day intensives. You could go get a master's at Columbia in sustainability, and I bet it would be amazing. And I don't know anyone in the industry who has a year or 2 years to take off, press pause, and say, I'm going to go do this and pay for graduate school. So what we're providing is these 5-day intensives where you're surrounded by a community of peers, global peers, so truly perspective shifting, and then creating a curriculum, if you will, that's a mix of knowledge, practical tools, and then inspiration. And the inspiration takes all forms, from the meals you eat to the colleagues you encounter to the guest lecturers and faculty who tend to be sort of the top of the top in the field, doing some of them known, some of them less known, but doing some of the very best work in our profession.
Interesting. And how do you like matriculate into this thing? Like,
Yeah.
how do you get chosen, or like what?
You're ready to sign up. You can come teach with us. We open applications once a year, and those are typically on a rolling basis. But we ask people to tell us why they come, and we are looking for that spark of ambition to be better than the status quo. We're looking for people who will be really committed to change and to taking what they learn with us and bringing it back to the restaurant they work in, so that we have now 1,000 alum out in the world, and they come from 50 different countries. And what's exciting about those 1,000 alum is what they learn with us, whether it's about reducing food waste or decreasing packaging, getting rid of plastics in kitchens, being a better leader, figuring out how to build a team, making their bottom line better. Those 1,000 alum can take what they've learned and share it with their colleagues. And they do that not just in the place they go back to, but if they're doing that over a lifetime, there's a real potential for impact to add up.
Yeah. What is the cadence of these programs? Is it like a set period of time, then it keeps rolling over, or?
Yeah, we'd love to do more of them. So we did programs this spring. Right now, we're taking some time to build new programs for the future. And so you'll see some more programs in spring of 25 and fall of 25. We'll have those dates up on our website very soon.
And geographically, like, where are people coming from to take? Because I imagine this is happening in Denmark, right?
That's right. So the academy courses are happening in Denmark. About a quarter of the people coming to them are Americans. And then the other 75%, really, 50 different countries across the globe. Could be Vietnam, could be Japan, could be Colombia or Venezuela, France, Denmark, Sweden. So one of the pieces of feedback we get from students is that being in such an international community is also perspective shifting and changes their access to solutions. We just saw one of our alum, she's in Minneapolis, has the amazing restaurant Muriel and Karen, and she has stayed connected with two alum from her class, Alejandra and Jay. And Alejandra's from Ecuador, Jay's from Australia. But for 4 years now, they've been connected. And they just did a pop-up in Minneapolis to
That's so
create
cool.
scholarships for
Yeah.
MAD Academy. So
That's amazing.
Yeah.
What is this is just a very base question, but like, what's the language there? If you're coming all over the world,
yeah. So we teach in English. Danes are speaking Danish. Copenhagen is an incredibly easy city to be in. Everyone starts learning English in the first grade.
Gotcha. And so, and if they're coming from other countries, Ecuador or what have you, then Brazil or something, English is sort of what the languages they use for that.
That's right.
Gotcha.
Maybe someday we'll be doing more simultaneous translation than we currently are, but
now you have AI.
We start here. Yeah.
You can just get a speaker and it'll translate for you. All right. So you have the academy. You have all these events that you guys do, the Symposium, the MAD Mondays. Also, I am just curious, like, how or is at all NOMA involved in this?
Absolutely, yes. And I want to return to some of our programs as well. René's our founder. NOMA, until we've just moved locations, but until a week ago, they were 500 meters down the road. So they're super closely involved. René is still our lead creative visionary when we're building new programs, when we're thinking ahead to what the world needs or what the profession needs. He is one of the people who we're in primary conversations with. He's got an incredible feel for what's needed.
Yeah. I imagine some of the, probably at least some of the NOMA alum are supporting maybe in the educationally or something. I did a panel a couple months ago, and 3 of the 4 folks on the panel were NOMA alum or were still at...
Rocio Sanchez was there, Ariel Johnson.
Yeah, it was
Rocio
right? And Ariel and Thomas Friebel, and then this guy Ryan, who's an incredible bartender. But you could tell it was very clear that like they had this sort of bond, the 3 of them, and there was a language, that they were speaking together. It was very clear that they had this bond. And I'm just curious.
And each of them has been involved in shaping MAD and shaping our programs, and sometimes actively teaching, sometimes acting as sounding boards, sometimes contributing via fundraisers. It's an incredible group. I think one of the things that is part of this world is a real sense of generosity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you were talking about the courses. So
Yeah.
you said you wanted to chat more about those.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of, approach at this stage, we basically separate out into leadership and business classes and environment and sustainability classes. And in each of those classes, we're trying to give people skills that they can use. Most of the people coming to the program have 7 to 10 years experience. So they're in managerial roles, either entering or learning, like really getting their chops. When we do the leadership and business class, for example, one of the great faculty members who comes in is Elin, who has her expertise is in building diverse teams. And so she'll not only talk about why that's important, but then do role plays with people participating in our programs. And it's through that type of interaction that you start to learn a new way to respond in the future. So that instead of just being on autopilot, you now know a different way. When we're doing the sustainability course, it's people like Doug McMaster, David Zilber, Guy Gyllenhaal, who are part of the work and helping lead the curriculum. So it's a really, I think one of the spots we excel is like it is actionable for restaurants, and that is an incredibly important differentiator. And what we're seeing is this is becoming important not just to the customers. 80% of people say they will choose a restaurant based on whether they have sustainable food or not. But we can see very clearly that what is available and when it is available from our produce suppliers is shifting. And so to be able to work with that and work with it proactively, quite important for the future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, this is just a random question.
Yeah.
Only because last night my wife and I watched an episode of Omnivore, that
Of course.
show.
Yep.
Are you all associated with that at all? Or is there any sort of like collaboration or anything happening?
So if you watch the coffee episode,
that's what we watched last.
That's the one you watched.
Coffee
so
one,
you met Arthur then, and Arthur and René met through MAD. So Arthur tells an incredible story in our book, MAD Dispatches, You and I Eat the Same, about growing up in Rwanda with coffee. And he tells a bit of that story in Omnivore. But I've got to say, it's even more moving in Dispatches. And Arthur came to MAD Symposium and he told that story on stage. And so we can share that with your audience too. So that's one of the ways NOMA and MAD and René all contribute and nourish one another creatively and intellectually, is this sharing of ideas and swapping of inspiration.
Yeah, it was a really beautiful story and also really, depressing. Like I didn't realize, for anybody that hasn't watched, like these Rwandans were basically forced to produce an enormous amount of coffee that was made illegal for them to even drink or make money off of. And so they were sort of trapped in this world. And it's really incredible to see now how, the descendants of them or their probably great grandchildren are now producing this really beautiful, bespoke, much higher quality coffee, and they're like really passionate about it. You could see this shift in, them actually having control of their agriculture. That was a beautiful story. All those stories are beautiful, but
I agree. And this is the power of, giving opportunity, of sharing knowledge, of building a community of people like we do at MAD. It changes the world. And it sometimes puts big changes in play, sometimes makes a small dent. And we want to help people each lean into their ability to make that change.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I have like a million questions, but like up front, like I'd love to understand, like, what are you like most excited about right now? And also, and I apologize, I'll remind you again, but like, I also would love to hear, like, what are a couple like anecdotes of like really high impact things that you've seen happen from MAD that you're like really proud about?
Fantastic. What I'm really excited about right now, there are many, many things I'm really excited about. Your listeners should sign up for our newsletter so that we've got some big news coming out in a couple of months that I can't tell you about yet. but they should sign up for our newsletter. That's one thing, what's ahead. But the other thing I'm excited about is that I see attitudes within our profession and external to our profession changing about the importance of education. So, I know you went to culinary school from listening to the podcast, and culinary school does an incredible job of setting the table, right? Giving the fundamentals, helping. It's perhaps a mise en place, and it focuses so much on craft, and you're so early in your career that you don't necessarily have all the skills you need to lead a team, to manage a restaurant, to serve the environment. And I think that attitude is changing. People are starting to understand, yes, I save up a bunch of money to go to a wine tasting or to buy a slew of good bottles with friends. I could also invest that money in my education, because that education is something that I'm also carrying forward and taking with me. So I think we're seeing really new receptivity to new types of education. We're seeing more owners and more multi-unit operations come to us and say, can you design a type of training for us? And I'm excited about that, because that's how we're going to move forward as a field and as a community.
Just so I'm clear, most of this education that you're seeing is manifesting in internal programs within restaurant groups, right?
Yeah, so
what you mean?
there's, the academy programs, when they are open to anyone working in hospitality. And that's a program an individual can sign up for, join us for the 5 days and be connected into this network. And then very, newly, as owners and larger operators have started to hear about our work, they've started coming to us and saying, we need your expertise to design a program in how our restaurant can reach its carbon goals. Or we need your expertise to help us understand what our customers are talking about when they're asking, is this sustainable? Or simply, we need some inspiration. Our team is tired post-corona, and they're still tired. And so people are coming to us for programs like that. And those we do anywhere in the world. Those are new, but they're fun. We've been to Tallinn, to Estonia, to the States, to the UK, Sweden, and we aim to
I
do
love
more of
that. I feel
those.
like we've been talking about that a lot this season. I was just chatting about this with Will Godara last episode, and
Yeah.
I think a couple other people as well. Just the idea that for sure, as chefs, we never learned, leadership among anything else. And in culinary school, very little of that is happening. There's some sort of very tactical business things, but nothing really, broad stroke or that's going deeper. It is sort of unfortunate, but I hope that this continues to change, because, culinary school probably is not the place to learn as much of the technique as you would think, because most of that you have to kind of, it sounds bad to say this, like unlearn or learn it a lot more deeply when you go to a restaurant and culinary school, you're typically learning like very classic techniques and things. But the things that we need to learn more about is, leadership, and what does it mean for a team to be, successful, and how do you think about like using farms in your in your restaurant, which, by the way, is really difficult if you don't do it the right way.
What does it mean to build a relationship with a farmer? And how does it work financially, and how does it work over time, and how does it move the needle for you and for them?
Yeah, and it has to start early, because otherwise, because it's going to take years for that to really go downstream to, or upstream to, like scaled restaurants.
Yes.
There's a reason why you don't see a lot of farms being used at restaurants at scale, because it's just really hard. I think Dan Simons does a really great job of this with Pounding Farmers, and there's other folks that do it well.
The work
it's
that
so
Sweet
hard.
Green has been doing on beef looks very interesting to me, and I know they've been at it for years. Yes.
Yeah, Just Salad as well. They do a really good job, but it sounds like you all are helping a lot with that as well, with just sort of at the micro level, of just like helping people understand
Absolutely.
how to do it. What does that look like? Are there are you interfacing with farmers and the restaurants?
We'll be interfacing more and more with farmers in the future. I did have a farmer at a party in Stockholm say to me, "Are you the person responsible for MAD Academy?" all these young chefs are now calling me and asking me about the carbon footprint of what they're purchasing. And that felt, so she thought we were a little bit of a headache, but that felt good, right? The action is being taken, the conversation is being had, and that's part of where change begins.
That's awesome.
You asked about impact and where we see MAD's impact. And I would say it's on so many different dimensions. But if I think of stories that like really moved me over the last years, I mean, one, Mark Rosati from Shake Shack came to an early symposium. This was maybe in 2012, 2014, and learned what a problem food waste was. And Mark went back home to Shake Shack and started looking at where there was waste in the kitchen. And in the end, totally revamped what was happening. You know, the lettuce on their burger, they had been throwing away 2/3 of it.
Mm-hmm.
So his first step was, okay, we're going to move from throwing it away to compost. And then the second step, as soon as he could figure it out, was what happens to the rest of that lettuce. And it's the salad on their fried chicken sandwich. Like that will always
That's
stay
amazing.
with me. Watching, the owner of a small restaurant in Paris talk with the culinary director of Chipotle about break-even points and what to do with avocado pits and peels. That type of exchange. I think about one of our students, Ido Levy from Israel. He was able, after being in our course, was able to go back to his vegetable and his fish purveyors and shift them from cardboard boxes to reusable containers for all deliveries. And so some of it happens on the edges, but I think each one of those changes means an individual ends up feeling clear on how they can make a difference, able to see how that change makes a difference and adds up. And that just has this momentum to keep going. So
That's huge.
yeah.
Oh, do you know Wojtek? I just sent you in the chat. This
Okay.
guy, his name is Wojtek Beck. He has this thing. He's doing some really incredible work in food waste. I sent you his website, but he's sort of all over that, like using every single piece of and he's teaching this now. He just goes everywhere around the world and teaches people how to use the entirety of the product. Really, really cool stuff he's doing there.
I will check him out. Yeah.
So you have this academy, and
Yes.
it seems like it's definitely having a big impact. This symposium, so it's annual. Is it something that's like
I
evolved
wish it
over the
were
years?
annual. Actually, so we haven't done the symposium in quite some time, since 2018.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we bring it back when we feel like there's the right moment, when we feel like there's something we can offer the industry. It's an enormous undertaking, incredible amount of resources. It means people flying in also. So we want to be thoughtful
I
about
actually
when we
love
do
that premise because
Yeah.
it's it's very sort of pragmatic. Rather than forcing something each year and finding topics, waiting for something that's like so meaningful that it's worth bringing people from around the world, together.
It's what musicians do when they make an album, or chefs do when they open a new restaurant, right? But paying attention to what's needed creatively is incredibly important, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Is there talks about another one soon, or?
There might be. When that symposium happens, it is, again, people from all over the globe, but people from the highest levels of the industry, young stages, all together in Copenhagen, moving around the city, eating incredible food, learning together, and then coming home nourished, refreshed, ready to support this industry. That's the other thing I hear after people have attended our programs. And sometimes I hear it from themselves. Sometimes I hear it from the people they report to. It's that they come back, whether it's from the symposium or from our academy programs, or even an evening MAD Monday, they come back a little bit more in love with the everyday of work and a little bit more joyful about it.
What is this Mad Monday?
Yeah, so we knew we needed a way to get people together, even if they can't come to Copenhagen. We wanted also to create something that's a bit more local. So we bring MAD Mondays we were just in New York for one, and we'll come back to the States again next year. It's an evening, it's a conversation, it's a debate. Sometimes it's a debate about natural wine and whether that needs to be certified natural. More recently, we did a debate on profits in restaurants and put some nonprofit restaurant ideas next to for-profit and asked if you could do good and do well financially. So those are, open to the public, fun evening, great conversation, good debate. And people can find out about those. I know I mentioned our newsletter before. People can find out about those from our newsletter. But the reason I want people to sign up for our newsletter is because they are an incredible resource. Lisa A. Bend, who is a journalist, joined our team. And what she's doing in those newsletters, which come out monthly, is taking an issue that's important to restaurants or to the world and running it through the eyes of restaurateurs. So if you're trying to figure out how to provide childcare to your employees in a restaurant, if you're thinking about how to manage your restaurant financially, whether to open the books to your employees, what open book management would look like, if you're thinking about how to start on the path of making your practices more sustainable, there's some clues and answers in that newsletter. So when I encourage people to sign up, it's not simply so you can find out what's next. It's because the 10 minutes you spend reading that each month will change your practices.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I was curious how everyone can get involved, and more specifically, like asynchronously, how can we get involved? Because there's visiting Denmark, and then there's things that happen around the world. But from an async standpoint, it sounds like there's a newsletter. Are there other like resources or things that people in the industry can look at or engage with?
So newsletter, of course, our Instagram handle at the Mad Feed, and then on our website, there is a treasure of recipes. I actually just learned from a Michelin-starred chef in Los Angeles who did not go to culinary school. This was the way he educated himself about the industry. He went to our website. He found the videos from our first 6 symposia, and it's everyone from Massimo Bottura or Magnus Nielsen speaking on the development of their career to Dario Cecchini in northern Italy, butchering a pig on stage, soba noodles being made, David Chang talking about terroir for the first microbiomal terroir, Fido Guevara talking about what it means to truly be hungry, where she grew up in Kenya and what she's doing about it.
Oh yeah, I'm looking at it right now. This is awesome.
So I think if people want content that is about, food, every element of it, they can check those out. And those are available as a free resource.
Very cool. I mean, what is your day-to-day like? No.
My day-to-day is fantastically varied. So my day-to-day could include a walk around with a restaurant manager who's figuring out how to deal with a tricky issue on her team. It could include, like it did today, a lunch created to get people in Copenhagen to talk about shaping a new food system. It is always about looking at what's happening in the profession, locally and globally, trying to understand the trends and pick out what problems are the most important and the most relevant to help people solve. It's always about helping this industry evolve. And of course, we're a nonprofit. So there's a big chunk of my time that is spent pitching people on the importance of this, on the importance of education, on the importance of great restaurants to our communities, and on the importance of food in relationship to climate. It was after the corona pandemic, I had a couple of people come to me and say, oh, yeah, Matt has been talking about the importance of restaurants for a long time. And now I get it. So I do spend a lot of my time fundraising, part of the job. And I have an amazing team to work with.
That's great. I have to do a little of that as well. It's not fun. But
you meet the most interesting people. I think, I feel so lucky that the people who support MAD, sometimes it is someone who's been to one of our programs and is sending $25 back to us every month from their restaurant job. And sometimes it's people who are making really, really significant contributions. And they are people who travel for food and love food and know that the world is better for interesting restaurants. And that the only way we can keep those is by making sure they are great places to work and that the people working in them are prepared for the future. And that's a future that involves climate change.
I love that.
Yeah.
By the way, I was looking at all the videos on the MAD's website. It's
Exactly.
incredible.
You don't need me. Just go to the
My
videos.
God,
I mean, you
it's
get an
amazing.
incredible taste of what we do.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, I mean, I know there's a announcement coming out that you can't talk about. What's on the horizon? What does MAD look like 5-10 years from now? How do you see this sort of evolving?
Great question. Yeah. My team is gathered together all next week to begin to answer this question. So I'm quite excited about that. When René and I look at the future, we know that MAD and NOMA continue to evolve really closely together, and that what we want to be putting energy and attention on, particularly at MAD, is how are we going to contribute to the food system of the future? People working in restaurants have this incredible capacity and incredible training that allows, I think, two things. One, if you're a chef, you know what flavor is and you know how to create flavor. If you're a server, you know how to help someone to taste something new, right? To guide them through that experience. And those two capacities are capacities we're going to need for the future as we build a new food system. And I think if we tap hospitality, often this is left in the hands of farmers and a scientist. And I love farmers and scientists, but we need people who are paying attention to the flavor side of things. So certainly MAD's future will involve more and more programming that is focused on helping people develop those skills. And, we're going to do more work stateside. If the resources are there, we want to be able to bring these MAD Mondays forward.
Amazing.
To more people.
All right. Well, Thank you for what you all are building. It's incredible.
Such a pleasure to speak, Josh. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, it was
Such a
just good to catch up. It's been,
Yeah.
I can't believe it's been a decade, but it's probably been a decade.
It seems so wild. Yeah.
I know. I
So
know.
wild. I was actually back in Prospect Heights, and I lived in that neighborhood when you guys were open there, and I don't even remember what's in your old spot, but I still think of that as a BARC location.
Yeah.
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 I haven't been back there. And I live now in Westchester.
Are you in Westchester? But
Yeah, I'm in northern Westchester. Yeah.
You have kids, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Where in northern Westchester?
Croton on Hudson.
Nice. Oh, that's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Did you grow
up at the Hudson.
You didn't grow
No.
up there. No.
I grew up in Virginia, actually.
Okay.
But my family grew up in New York. So
And remind me
parents.
where in Virginia?
Northern Virginia.
Virginia.
So just like about 30 minutes south of DC, right by Quantico Marine Base.
Okay. My brother's in Ashburn. Now I'll look for Quantico.
It's enough of a short drive to DC where like a lot of people work in DC, and then a lot of people work also just a lot of like military FBI kind of thing because of Quantico Marine Base.
Hey, what are you excited about in your work, and what are you seeing as the big themes that are emerging?
Well, one, people are just getting a lot better at being operators, and on top of being great
Totally
chefs. I
agree.
think that we've seen this evolution of, there wasn't nearly as many restaurants driven by chefs, a decade ago, 2 decades ago than there are today. And so at first what you saw was just this evolution of just way more good food in restaurants, way more, and this is really why we exist at meez. This is why I built meez. It's like, I want to bridge sort of creativity and profitability. I think
good.
you need to be able to do both of those things. And for a very
Absolutely.
long time, those things were almost at odds with each other. And I think what I get really excited about is seeing like how people are becoming, we have in aggregate way more better cooks and chefs than we ever have. But we also are just getting better operators, people understanding the how to, operate, the restaurant in addition to how to make great food and great service. So that's been really exciting to see sort of those things kind of like come together, because it's if you don't have that, to your point, you can't do other things, right?
Yeah.
You can't, take what you're doing and give back to the community more and grow like other ideas out of it and things like that. So I'm really excited about that. I also just love like what we're like, I love building what we're building. It was a tool that I always wanted. And so it's just so fun to have a thing that
You
it's almost
always
like,
wanted. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And then we just kind of get to geek out on all the
You're
things that
like
we want to.
making people's dreams come true, right?
That's the best part. I mean, obviously, like we have like a lot of like ROI and things that we focus on as we're selling to like larger groups and selling to more than just chefs now. But the best feeling is always when you see the chef be like, oh my God, where was this 20 years ago? They, you know, like
I remember doing this by hand. Yeah. Or,
that's
feeling really good about having it in Excel, which is not nearly as good as what what you built.
I mean, it's also like this enormous pressure and also like responsibility that's probably what drives me the most is that, I mean, there are thousands of people using our tool now, which is really cool. And
so good.
Most chefs you can think of, they have, whether they're using the free account or the paid account, are using meez to store their recipes. And there's still a lot more that aren't yet that we, will obviously like work on growing.
They're US based, is that right?
We are in about 18 countries. Primarily it's the US and Canada, but there's a lot in like South America and Mexico and Dubai, Australia, just because you can translate the recipes to like 140 languages.
I noticed that it's very clever. Yeah. To do the translations.
But really the responsibility is like, it's both a good stress and also like the biggest motivator, knowing that everybody is using this for their recipes and among other things. I'm like, these are my people. These are a lot of them are my friends. Like, I got to make sure that we keep making this better because it's their, it's their work. So that's always like the most fun and also the thing that keeps me on my toes the most.
I love that way of thinking about it.
Yeah.
What's Sergio doing for you?
Sergio is
like your head of sales or something. No?
He's on the sales team, but he kind of does a lot of things. So he sells the product, but he's also helping with like, just a bunch of like operational things and doing what Serge does.
Yeah.
It's great to see we have like, we have so many people on the team that are like, that came from restaurants.
Great restaurants.
This girl, Ursula, who owned a really amazing spot in Chicago called Jeff and Jude's. And then we met her at a culinary event and she was like, loved the app, and then just now she's running like partnerships and events for us.
Josh, I also loved on your website that you identify people as chef, right? Like within their title.
Yeah.
It's really clever. It's really respectful. Yeah.
Well, it's for me, like we have these like first principles. It means there's 4 of them that are like our primary first principles. I'm a big believer in autonomy and letting people make their own decisions and even just run their own sort of little world within the business. And the only way it works is if you have these principles and heuristics that like we all agree upon. And it's like, as long as you like make decisions through these principles. And the number one principle is operational empathy. And when you're a chef or a restaurant owner or somebody that came from that world, it's just so much easier for you to have that because I'm not going to call somebody at 11 a.m.
Exactly.
I'm not going to expect them to write me back so that part's been...
In fact, I'm not going to write them an email. I'm going to send them a text when it is a convenient time, right?
Yeah. And also we do a little bit of outreach now. We never really did in the past. And part of how we built the company was on this foundation of operational empathy, in that like we built this sort of what they call like a product-led tool. And that like, instead of having salespeople go out, we just give the product away for free and let you use it. And then once you want to do more, you can kind of just do things yourself and upgrade so you don't have to talk to a sales rep.
That's awesome.
Anyways, I will be at the next symposium, by the way, when it does happen.
Good.
And I'm very excited to see what you all are building. It's really cool.
Right.
So thank you.
I will look forward to having you here. Yeah.